Hey guys, thanks for joining me on this episode of the HUSTLR podcast. And today I have Laura Pennington Briggs with me on the show for this episode, and she's a 2-time TEDx speaker, and she also just launched her own book, Start Your Own Freelance Writing business book. I think it was co-published with Entrepreneur Media. Correct me if I'm wrong. And she also runs a podcast, Advanced Freelancing. So guys, there will be a lot of tips in this episode in regards to starting your own freelancing gig, and because Laura has been there, done that, so she can definitely teach you lots of stuff, okay? And she also runs a blog at Better Business Academy where she has courses and she blogs about freelancing, so check that out. I'll be leaving the website URL in the show notes down below. And she's also a freelance consultant / writer. And how I met Laura was actually really funny. I met her on LinkedIn. I was looking for writers for my own blog, HUSTLR, and she wrote into me with a rate that is extraordinarily high, right? And I thought, wow, like this lady must know her stuff. So I checked her out, I stalked her a little bit, and I found out that she's really, really awesome. And that's why I brought her onto the show, and she's cool enough to come on. Say hi, Laura.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
No worries. So let's start off by, just telling me and the audience about your story. How do you get started with freelance writing?
I used to be a teacher. I taught 7th grade here in the US, and I really didn't love it. It was not a good fit for me. It was very stressful. I was underpaid. I was putting in 14, 15-hour days. So I started looking for something else that I could do as a career and thought, well, a lot of what I do as a teacher is preparing lesson plans. It's helping students read. It's helping them improve their writing. So I thought writing might be a good fit for me. So I started teaching myself how to write for search engine optimization purposes, writing about pages, press releases, all kinds of material for clients. And that eventually grew to the point that I had to leave my full-time job and have worked as a freelancer for the last 7 years.
Right, cool. So how long did you stay, how long did you work as a teacher, if you don't mind me asking?
I was a teacher for a year in middle school. Mm-hmm.
Right. So during that year, you picked up some writing skills, and then you just started taking on clients. Like
Yes,
even when
I worked
even
part-time.
yeah. Okay, cool. So how did you get your first client? Do you mind sharing how that was like as a
Yeah,
freelancer? Yeah.
I used a freelance job board. Today it is known as Upwork. And a job board is essentially where clients post their potential projects, and then any freelancer that's active on that board can respond and say, here's my rate and here's my turnaround time. So that's how I got my start. But I've kind of moved away quite a bit from using job boards in the last several years, just working with a lot of private clients. Most of my clients are on retainer, so I provide content for them every month. So the first project I ever had, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to price. I was just kind of making my best guess, but it was a really good learning experience going forward for the next projects.
Right. So you started this freelance writing business in 2012, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what has changed since then? Now it's 2019 now, so I'm pretty sure that your business has grown leaps and bounds. So I just want to know, like, what has changed, and have you grown your team? Have you changed the way you work and stuff like that?
I have done all of those things, and it definitely has changed from how I started. I spent 1 year in there, 2015. I outsourced all of my content writing work to other writers, and I hated that. So I abandoned that model, and at the end of that year said, okay, if I'm going to do all my freelance writing client work by myself, what does that mean? I had to be very choosy about who I worked with. So I do have virtual assistants. They do everything from writing to editing. They produce my podcast. They publish my blogs for me. They send pitches on my behalf. Sometimes if someone's emailed in and asked for information, they'll respond. with the details. So today I actually split my time. About half my time is doing writing for clients, and the other half is coaching freelancers through the podcast. I have a Facebook group, and then I also coach freelancers one-on-one who are established and are looking to kind of grow to the six-figure or beyond point. So my time is about split. So any public speaking I do, my book, all of that kind of falls under the second business, but I do still write for clients today.
Right. So you mentioned that you are powered. You get virtual assistants to help you out. So how many of them, like if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so my general virtual assistant has been with me for 5 years. He makes all of my PowerPoint presentations. He also manages one of my side hustle businesses for me. We sell all my old lesson plans as a teacher on a site that's kind of like eBay for teachers called
Right.
Teachers Pay Teachers. So he does that. I have a graphic design VA who does anything that's image facing, all images, PDFs, freebies, all of that. I have an author's assistant who does things like manage my email list. Then I have a podcast producer and show notes writer who does that as well. So all of these people are pretty much on contract. Only my VA of 5 years is on retainer right now. So I work with them on an as needed basis. And sometimes I bring on other people. Right now I have a website designer who's redoing some things on my site, for example. But those are kind of the core people that I work with every month.
Right. Okay. So do you mind sharing some of your time management techniques? Because it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. You've got courses, you've got your podcast, you also do some speaking, and you also write and coach. So what kind of time management techniques do you use to, stay on top of all these kind of stuff and, just to stay sane?
Yeah. Well, outsourcing to VAs is step one. When you start making consistent revenue, ask yourself what you can get off your plate and give to a virtual assistant. If you're charging $100 an hour or even $50 an hour, or the equivalent in whatever currency, then don't do tasks that are only $10 or $20 an hour tasks. You can outsource those and focus your time on making as much money as possible during the hours you're working. So that's key. Like, my time is not best spent making PowerPoint slide decks. I do have to show up on the webinar and sell my latest course or product, but I don't need to be the one who drops all the images and sets up the animations, for example. Posting my blog, same thing. I'll write the content, they can post it. So that's number one. I also like to make sure that I track my time with everything I do. So I use a free tool called Toggl, Toggl, and that helps me see where my time is going. And it also assists me with figuring out, am I spending too much time in email or scheduling or something like that I may be able to outsource? I'm also always experimenting with my schedule. So I've tried just about everything with scheduling. And what really works right now is Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are when I do my freelance writing client work, and when I do any communication. So phone calls, video recordings, making YouTube videos, recording podcasts like this. That almost always happens Tuesday through Thursday. And then Monday and Friday are my creation days. I'm making new products, I'm writing emails, I'm marketing, doing all that kind of behind the scenes stuff. So that makes sure that I'm always moving each business forward a little bit. So sometimes there's a little bit of, bleed over into other days when I can't make the schedule work, but that's pretty consistent.
Right. Okay. I wanted to zero in on one thing that you talked about earlier. So you're currently powered by a lot of VAs, and where do you find these guys?
I have found them all over the place. It's my best VA, who's been with me 5 years, actually came from Craigslist, but I don't think that Craigslist is a great source of VAs. So he's kind of the exception rather than the rule. Two of my VAs are from Upwork. So my podcast producer and my graphics designer, we originally met through Upwork. And then my other VA who works on my show notes is from a Facebook group. I posted in a Facebook group, who has experience writing show notes, and she sent me a message and had great examples. So I kind of prefer to go the referral route first. If somebody else can tell me they've had a positive experience with the VA, I'm much more likely to work with that person.
Right. Cool. And another thing that I picked up from what you said previously about attending webinars to sell your courses. Have you ever considered using automated webinar software like EverWebinar and stuff like that?
So I would love to do that. I used the non-evergreen version of EverWebinar, Webinar Jam, for over a year. And let me tell you, every single webinar I did had technical issues. Every single one. People couldn't hear me. The slides were delayed. I mean, it was just one problem after another. And so my audience was very good at being patient through that. But I know that if I was an attendee of a webinar like that, I might not be as patient. So I kind of want to give Webinar Jam and EverWebinar some time to flush out some of their issues. I just didn't feel like I could trust their automated service because the live webinars that I did just were such a complete mess for me to figure out. And they were always blaming it on me. Every time I sent in a support ticket, they'd say, "Oh, it's your internet." It's like, nope, I have the fastest internet you can get. Like, it's not going down or anything. So I have thought about that. It'll be something that I'm playing with in the future with some of my products that do sell and convert really well. It's like I've got all the pieces of the funnel, so I could set it up automated for sure.
Right. Okay. Um, cool. Like, thanks for that because I use Webinar Jam and EverWebinar myself, and I can attest to that sort of poor experience. Uh, so another thing is on your website, you talk a lot about using your skill set to help freelancers succeed in creating a freedom-based career. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So freedom means different things to different people. Some freelancers want to be a digital nomad who goes from one Airbnb to another in different countries. For other people, being able to be a freelancer means only working in the morning so they can be there when their kids get home from school or preschool. So, what I mean by that is designing your business around your life rather than the other way around. When we go and get a traditional job, our boss tells us you have to be here between this hour and this hour. This is what you do on the job. But when you're a freelancer, you can kind of have more flexibility over how you set it up, when you work, when your deadlines are, et cetera. So that's a lot of what I do is to help people to figure out, okay, what schedule is going to work for me and how do I pick clients and work with clients based on that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So, what is freedom to you personally?
It's being able to work as much or as little as I want to from any location I'm currently at. So I currently split my time between two different cities in the United States. So the fact that I can pick up my laptop, have Wi-Fi in either spot. When I go do public speaking gigs, I can take my work with me and do it on the airplane. My husband was in the military for 14 years, so we moved 8 times in the last decade. So being able to pick up and start fresh every new time we moved would have been really exhausting. But because I just take my business with me and it goes where I go, I didn't really experience any downtime throughout all those moves.
Right, right. That's interesting. So you've moved 8 times over the past 10 years. Wow, like that must be hectic.
Well, we've gotten better with moving each time, but we are so burned out from moving. My husband says, I have maybe one more move in me. He's not in the military anymore, so we're not now any move we make is on our terms, not someone else's. But yeah, it's been hard. We've lived a lot of different places and we just moved from Indiana to Minnesota and we'll be there for 2 years and then we'll be moving again. So we we just move all the time. We don't love moving all the time, but it was just the way life was for a while.
Right. Okay. So another thing that I'd like to talk about is the book that you've published with Entrepreneur Media recently. Congratulations on the book launch. And I just want to know how was that like? The process of writing, planning out the entire launch. Like how's that like?
It's a lot of work. So it was a lot of fun and it was not as hard as I thought it would be, but it is absolutely a lot of work. I actually think that the launch was harder than writing the book for me. Maybe that was due to the fact that I had already written the book and I was kind of like tired from that process, and then jumping into the launch was hard. My book came to fruition a lot faster than it does for most people. Traditional publishing usually takes 2 years from the time that your book is accepted. My book was published 9 months. after we signed a contract. So it was a lot faster. I had very short deadlines. So the fact that I've been writing for the last 7 years helped me a lot. I knew how to outline, how to write, how to edit as much as I could on my own. So I wrote the book between September of last year and December 1st. I turned in the first copy. And then I edited it in early January. We went through 3 rounds of editing, and then the book went to press. So it was a very short timeline. The cool thing about it was they wanted to rely on me as the expert. They wanted me to outline what I thought would be most important for new freelance writers. And that was a great responsibility to take on. But it was also good to not be told by someone else, okay, you have to include this. Because I said, I'm going to make this as relevant as possible for freelancers today. What does freelancing look like today? What do I think are the common pitfalls and places where you can be successful? So it was a lot of fun. A book launch is a ton of work. I did a lot of different things to support that. I made a book trailer. I landed 5 speaking gigs. I landed 2 TEDx talks, wrote them, memorized them, and delivered them, all in a 5-month period for both of those. And I did podcast tours. I did guest blogging on other people's websites. I built a launch team and had my launch team ready on kind of the go day when the book dropped a couple of weeks ago. So it was a lot of work, and I'm glad I took about 6 months to plan out my launch because I needed the full 6 months to get all the pieces in place.
Right. So what was your primary motivation in launching a book of your own?
Well, I've always wanted to write a book, so I knew that eventually someday I would try to. And my agent was actually trying to sell another book based on a proposal that I had written when this publisher entrepreneur came back and said, we'd like to do this other book first. So we'd like to see how that book performs, and then we can talk about other options. And they said, we really need somebody who can talk about what a freelance writing business is. And I thought, okay, like I can do that. So the approach that I had in the book was, this is the book I wish I had when I started. So it includes a lot of my mistakes. It includes the things I did right. It includes common places where people hit roadblocks and get challenged. I really also wrote it not just to say, here's why being a freelance writer is awesome, but also to say, here are some of the downsides, because it's not right for everyone, right? It can be kind of, some people find it isolating because you work by yourself a lot. I like that, but I was very candid in the book about here's what it actually looks like so that you can pick it up for less than $20 and decide, yes, I want to invest more time in becoming a freelance writer, or you know what, I read this and it isn't for me, and that's cool too. So you kind of save on investing any further time and money if it isn't a fit.
Right. So you see it as an entry point for
Yeah.
people who are looking into freelancing.
Yes, it's very much the overview of what can you write, how do you charge, where do you find clients, very much the 101 nuts and bolts of what goes into being a freelance writer. I don't talk about how to write. I don't talk about like grammar or structure or any of that. It's very much the business of freelancing, because that other subject could be a whole book on its own.
Right. So when are you launching another book? Are you planning to?
I'm hoping to. Yes, I have 2 books that I'm trying to write a formal proposal for with a publisher. And then because technology changes so quickly with some of the other projects I want to work on, I'm planning to launch a book for advanced freelancers in the next 5 to 6 months. That's the book that my agent was originally pitching. And so I'd like to be able to update that book often. So I don't know that I want it to be a print run. It might be a print on demand and electronic book. So that's what I'm hoping.
Okay. Like, what sort of advanced freelancing techniques? Like, do you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so running a 6-figure or a multi-6-figure freelance business looks very different from somebody who is just starting out. Somebody who's just starting out is trying to figure out what they want to do, how to charge, how to make consistent money. Advanced freelancers are looking for help with scaling. How do they grow their business to get more of their time back? How do you hire a VA? What is the mindset that you need to be successful as a 6-figure freelancer? You know, what business model are you going to take? Are you going to build an agency, or are you going to do this solo? And how does that look different? So it's really about what is that next step for a freelancer who likes what they do but is looking to grow it.
Right. Okay. I think that's a very interesting topic because freelancing typically has always been, you're always trading time for money, right? When you were just starting out, but turning it into a scalable, sellable business is a whole different other story. So I think I'll be waiting for that book because it's something that I would be very, very interested in myself. So
Okay.
here's a little bit of a personal question, Laura. Like, what do you like doing on your free time? Like, what does your free time look like?
Well, I have pets. So I have a pug dog, and I take him on walks every day, and we're actually trying to train him to do dog shows. So we do a lot of training and reinforcing his training. My husband is also a huge horror movie fan, comic book fan. We go to a lot of horror and comic book conventions. We've met most of the cast of The Walking Dead and Stranger Things. And so we go to conventions and we meet people. My favorite so far is probably Weird Al and John Cusack. They were just really cool and acted like they weren't really that big of a deal to meet. So it's really neat to be able to do stuff like that kind of gets you out of the house and away from your computer a little bit.
Wow. So your husband is actually like a military geeky guy. Does
Well,
it
he
sound like
is,
that?
but he's a doctor too, so he's like very, very intelligent and very rugged. But under all of that, there is this full-blown geek. Yeah,
I can totally relate to that. I love my comic books as well, and I love my
yeah.
Stranger Things. Um, cool. Okay. I think this has been a really productive episode. Um, so for the audience who are just starting out, if you have to give one advice to people who have absolutely no clue about freelancing, what would you tell them?
Try to pick something that you either already know how to do. So if you're great at coding, you might start a coding side hustle or a web development side hustle, or something you're passionate about and you'd love to learn. So either one of those will give you a great foot in the door. Don't pick something to do just because you think it will make you money or it seems like it's a hot trend. Because if this is going to be a long-term business for you, it has to be a service that you like providing. So pick something in your background. For me, I always loved reading and writing, so writing was a natural fit. But maybe you've always been wanting to learn graphic design and you're like, I'm willing to invest in a course to become a great designer and learn how to use Adobe. You don't have to go back to school or get a 4-year degree to do it. You can find great tools and books and podcasts online. So that's what I would recommend to total beginners.
Right. Cool. So in your case, you started off as a teacher and then you ventured into freelance writing. How long did you think you took to get really good at writing?
Probably about a year and a half to 2 years of doing it every day. And what's hard for people who sell writing services is you have to understand the craft of writing, but you also have to adapt to different people. Some of my clients will say, I want this to be serious. It needs to read very professional. And others will say, you can be funny, you can be sarcastic. So being able to adapt to different styles of writing is definitely an art and something you learn over time. And you also learn it from getting feedback from your clients. So every time someone gave me feedback or I found someone online where I admired their writing, it helped me improve a little bit. And so that's really kind of built on each other over the course of years.
Right. Okay. So I think that's very actionable. But here's the last question before we end the show. Okay. Like thanks again for coming onto the show. If you could start your entire journey all over again, would you have done anything differently?
I think that I would have left my day job sooner. I stayed working in a traditional job for the first 13 months that I freelanced, and I could have left a lot sooner. I could have left 3 months in, 6 months in. I was really scared to go full time working for myself because I thought, well, what if business just dries up and I can't bring in money? Like, that's going to be a problem. But then once I left into the world of working full time as a freelancer, I realized how much I liked it. So I wish I'd done it a little bit sooner. So on the one hand, it's like I got great experience balancing the two things, but I definitely wish I'd made the leap of faith a lot sooner.
Right, because I think this is a real issue that, there's a lot of self-doubt and anxiety going on right before you quit. But you knew that it was your true calling, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what was the trigger for you to make that decision? I'm sorry, I'm just extending it a little bit because I just want to dig a little bit deeper.
It's okay. Yeah, I think for me, well, one, I saw that I was making more money part-time as a freelance writer than I was in my regular job working full-time. So I saw the possibility. And then I started to see a real difference between how I felt at my two jobs. So when I was freelance writing, I was excited for clients. I was very motivated. And as more time went on during my day job, everything annoyed me. Like, it really wasn't stuff that was that big of a deal, but that coworker like chewing gum next to me, I was like, oh, this is unbearable, right? Because I had a direct thing to compare it to. So the more annoyed I got with my day job, the more I really saw like, I shouldn't be here, right? Like, I'm not bringing to the table what this employer needs because I'm no longer motivated. I'm just like agitated all the time. So that was a real tipping point for me.
Okay, cool. So that's all for this episode, and thank you so much once again for coming on to the show, Laura. You're super cool. I mean, we haven't even met. We just spoke on LinkedIn, and you were like, okay, let's get onto the show. And I'm really glad that we had this conversation, okay? And I think that my audience could really, really benefit from this episode. So, guys, for those of you listening, if you want to start learning how to be an awesome freelancer like Laura, check out the link in the show notes down below, or check out her website at Better Biz Academy. It's BETTERBIS Academy, ACADEMY, right? And if you're interested in starting your own freelance writing business, definitely check out Laura's book. It's available on Amazon. So, is it available in ebook format in Kindle?
Yes, it is.
Yep. So get that book, okay, if you're interested. Yeah. That's it for this episode. If you like this episode or if you think that someone would benefit from this episode, definitely share it with that friend or family. Okay. Thanks, Laura. Once again, say bye.
Thank you. Bye.